Thanks for staying with us on the conversation. On the first half, we dealt with situations between the DRC and Rwanda, where the French President Emmanuel Macron has put in mediation efforts to bring in peace between these two countries. And right now, we move to situations in Nigeria where the back and forth struggle of Nigeria's university strike seems to have no end in sight. This is as the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, has said it is set to appeal the order by the National Industrial Court, NIC, directing the suspension of its 7-month-old strike. In a statement to union members titled NIC Back to Work Order in ASUU, Be Calm, it urged members and Nigerians to remain united, even as it suggested that the order will be vacated.
Now, the order by the National Industrial Court asking the Academic Staff Union of Universities to end its current strike and resume classes is as the result of a directive given to the court by the Minister of Labour and Employment, Senator Chris Ngige. Meanwhile, Nigerian students on Monday, September the 19th, protested the strike deadlock that shut the country's public universities, causing frustration for an estimated 2.5 million students. Now, joining us live this evening to discuss this in the conversation, we have Dr. Misbah Latif, a lecturer in law at the University of Hull. We also have Adenola Michael, National Coordinator, Fund Education Coalition. We also have joining us Barrister Jide Ologun, a legal practitioner. One welcome to you, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to start with Barrister Ologun so we can have the legal perspective to all of what is going on. Now, counsel to the federal government, James Igwe, had submitted that Section 18, subsection 1E of the Trade Disputes Act provided that employees cannot be on strike when a matter is before the industrial court. Opposing the application, Femi Falana, counsel for ASUU, said asking the union to resume work is wrong and scandalous. Can you tell us more about the legal standings of these two parties and what right does ASUU stand? What are ASUU's chances as it plans to appeal this judgment?
You know, let's start by explaining that what the National Industrial Court did is to grant an interlocutory injunction. And this is an injunction of a court in order to compel or prevent a party from doing certain acts pending the final determination of the case. And basically, it's asking that you maintain status quo. But in this situation, when you want to talk about the status quo, the strike is on already. But the judge went ahead to also disclose that he made that pronouncement in the interest of the nation, you know, to prevent a catastrophe. Recall that the students have gathered themselves and they have already started protesting. They even threatened that they would destabilize the campaigns that may commence soon. And when you talk about the Section 18 of the Trade Disputes Act, it's about prohibition of lockouts and strikes before issue of award of National Industrial Court. So the position of the government is that, okay, this matter is before the court now, so suspend your strike. But when one of the things that should be looked into is the position of the International Labour Organization. And through the implementation of the ILO's 4 strategic objectives, talking about promoting jobs, guaranteeing rights at work, extending social protection, and promoting social dialogue. You know, the right to strike is a fundamental right. All right, so even with the law being referred to, there are fundamental issues here that must be attended to. And the president of ASUU came out to say that this may even be doing more damage. Many lecturers have left the country. Many more are going to leave. The fundamental demands have not even been attended. Would it have made any difference if the court also made an order that the federal government should go and pay what ASUU is asking for? By and large, before I anchor my submissions on this, what the federal government is asking the court to do is to interpret the provisions of that Section 18 as it applies to cessation of strike once a trade dispute is apprehended by the Minister of Labor and Employment and conciliation is going. But in this particular situation, the dialogue appears to have failed. And as early as 1927, the ILO explicitly recognized the right to strike, linking it directly to freedom of association. So here we are now. Are we going to come to the point where the yearnings of revitalizing our universities, of ensuring that the lecturers actually deliver on their services, are put in place as some of the demands highlight? So here we are now. And a wise man said you can force a horse to the brook, but you cannot force the horse to drink water from the brook. So what about if the lecturers even decide to call off the strike and they don't give their best to the students? So the students and the parents are still the recipients of the hard brunt here. And like I said earlier, many of them have even gone outside the country. Huge statistics. So that is where we are right now. And by and large, there will soon be a need to resolve the fundamental issues that are here. Meanwhile, the matter is still before the National Industrial Court, though ASUU has decided to go ahead and appeal that order of the court, that interlocutory injunction. So you may see this case going on for years. So what happens to our educational system?
All right, before you continue, I'd like to bring in Dr. Lateef, still on this legal aspect now. Barrister Jide Ologun mentioned the fact that there's a fundamental right to strike. Now, ASUU has gone ahead to appeal this judgment from the court, saying that the federal government too has not also put it in its own part and paying the standing arrears. Now, is ASUU under any obligation? Because the reason why the court agreed for ASUU to go back to the classes is that the matter is still before the court. Now, is ASUU under any obligation while this matter is still in court to return to classes?
Thank you so much for asking this question. And I think a straightforward answer to that is to say yes. A court order, or any court order for that matter, is meant to be complied with, is meant to be obeyed. So basically, ASUU is by law obliged to comply with that order of court while the matter is still pending. However, this does not remove the right of ASUU to appeal against the ruling as they have done. But nevertheless, that they have appealed does not also mean that they will not comply with the order. So in this case, really, what I expect is that ASUU, as a group of intellectuals, will, on one hand, comply with the order of the court, particularly that this order is still standing or subsisting as I speak now, and particularly also that they have not applied or successfully obtained a further order of court staying the execution of that order. So basically, ASUU, as a matter of law, should comply with that order while the matter is ongoing.
And what if they disobey? What if they disobey and they do not go back to classes? What happens?
If they disobey, first, that will, in a way, I will say, that will not actually look good and will not augur well for the dispensation of rule of law in our society. And if there's going to be any disobey of court order, it shouldn't come from a group of intellectuals. Then in addition to that, I must say this, under Section 18 sub 2 of the Trade Dispute Act, the law actually emphasizes a situation whereby an order of that nature is disobeyed. And the law says that whoever disobeys such an order will be fined individually, I think 1,000 naira or something like that, or maybe committed to 6 months imprisonment. And if it is an organization, will be fined 1,000 naira, I think, for every day of that. So basically, let us even leave the issue of Section 18 sub 2 apart. Let's focus on the implication of disobeying court order. That will be a contempt, and I don't think that is an image that a group of intellectuals that ASUU represent will want to have. But if I may quickly speak to some of the things that my learned brother, Barrister Ologunde, talk about, I think the issue really for me is not as to whether strike is a right or not. I mean, there is no debate about that. Strike is a matter of right, guarantee, even under the Nigerian law, without going as far as the International Labor Organization treaties. Hello?
Yes, we're listening.
Okay, so strike basically is a matter of right. I don't think federal government is disputing that. So my own take basically is that if strike is a right, should this right be applied in a manner that is disruptive or constructive? And I think the idea about strike, I mean, talking about the theoretical underpinning of that tool is to encourage, I would say, negotiation between employer and employee, is to encourage parties to discussion, to the table. So, but when you now employ a strike as a tool as a disruptive tool, as I've come to call it, then it becomes a problem. So the issue really is not whether a strike is a right or not. It is a right guaranteed by law. But does the law emphasize that you have a strike ad infinitum, that you have a strike permanently? No. I mean, we can bring this to the context of a private sector employment, for example. I mean, you don't set up a business whereby, you have industrial dispute with your employee, and then the next thing is that because of this dispute that you cannot resolve, then they shut down your business. So if we look at it from that context or perspective, then we begin to understand that whereas strike is a right, it is not an absolute right. Okay. And that is why you even have the court, in this circumstance to resort to where parties could not agree on terms or conditions.
Quite a very dicey situation to look at, because those striking say they are fighting for the heart of the university system in Nigeria. They say no going back. The government is adamant to, fulfill all their demands. So it's quite an interesting place. Now, Adenola, strikes have plagued Nigeria's university system for the better half of 3 decades, beginning in 1988. Issues such as unpaid salaries seem to be the heart of the problem. And the lecturers say they're fighting for better teaching condition, environment, and for the heart of Nigeria's tertiary education. Do you think the government has been too nonchalant about this issue? And how do we get both parties to reach a compromise?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I don't know how we can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thanks for bringing me on the show. Speaking to your question, I think it is more self-evident that the government has shown enough nonchalance, has shown unwillingness to fund education. Because first of all, if we are to access their impact on education, we go by the UN recommendation for funding or budgetary allocation for education, which is at least 15% of the budgetary allocation. But the Buhari government has been the only government which has actually funded education the most. But it is a patch of 7% of the general budgetary allocation. But this goes to show that all the successive governments since 1999 up to the moment have shown unwillingness to fund education, which is the paramount sector in any society. You would agree with me that for any nation that desires development, they must prioritize, they must fund the educational sector. And for me, I really think that the only language that the government understand is striking and direct confrontation, direct action. You would agree with me that since students took to the streets to block the national airport, the government has been, coming up as to moments before then. And speaking to the court order, we would not ask us to disobey the court order, but technically there are ways to go by that. For us students, we are the receiving end. Our own is that we stand by the position of the ASUU. We stand by the demands of ASUU. What are the demands of ASUU? The demands of ASUU is that
all right. I don't know that what you're clearly saying is that government has been quite nonchalant. I mean, we've had this issue since 1999 on this issue of salaries, on paid arrears. and all that. But I'll come to you later. But let's hear from Barrister Ologun now. There's another twist to it, the side of law, especially with this impasse between the federal government and ASUU. Now, there's been a threat by the federal government to withdraw the certificate of registration of the academic staff union of universities. Now, this is as a result of alleged failure to submit the financial reports of its audited account as required by law in its 5 years. Now, in response to this, ASUU's president claims it is an attempt to get the lecturers back to work. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, especially on this audited accounts that have not been given to you by the ASUU that the federal government has alleged to.
You know, just like when you have two professional boxers in the ring, you look out for how to knock down your opponent, and that is what we have here. So you may expect that the federal government will be finding ways to bring the lecturers to their knees. But what we are saying here is that teaching is not just an ordinary mandate. It's physical, it's physiological, it's psychological, it's emotional. It demands interest and passion. And the federal government must really be aware of this. And let me just hold brief a little bit for our other colleague on the platform today. ASUU's demands include the release of revitalization fund to revitalize our institutions, to attract even foreign lecturers into this country, just like they go out of the country. There was a report that about 23,000 lecturers leave Africa annually, not because they hate Africa, but because, they just want better respect, better, returns from their skills. And there was a report on the 3rd of July 2017, accredited to the acting president, then our vice president, Professor Yomi Osinbajo, who said that Nigerians spend 129.6 billion naira annually on UK education. Again, one of the demands of ASUU is that the government should honor the agreement of 2009, where it was agreed that 1.3 trillion naira will be put into public universities in 6 tranches, out of which in 2013, I think only 200 billion naira has been released. So these are issues. Then deployment of the transparency and accountability solutions, the payment issues and stuff like that. And recently, the government has tried to negotiate to do this and that. And the government now promised that, okay, in the 2023 budget, we'll give you 150 billion naira. But the 2023 budget is arriving as a deficit budget. I think it's between 12 and 14 trillion naira, out of which about 6.3 trillion naira will go into fuel subsidy. So ASUU does not have the trust capital to hold in honor of the federal government. You see, and that is why I do not want to tilt too much to one side. Okay, the order has been given now. Yes, they may resume back in school. What about if they are not given the lecture they should give? And the Professor Shudeke has warned that many more lecturers will leave the country. There's no court order that will say lecturers cannot see greener pasture. So what happens to the future of education in Nigeria? And that is a concern. And now we should ask a very big question. Are we prioritizing our expenditure as a nation? You see, the total indebtedness of this country as at March 2015 was about 12.12 trillion naira. Today, it's about 41.6 trillion naira, if not above. And we have almost neglected the education. You see, the lecturers have options. They can get out of the country. At a time, Saudi Arabia came to Nigeria to interview medical practitioners. You see, in fact, do you know the president also had a face-off with medical health workers at a time in 2021. And eventually, he said he pardoned them and ordered the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, to release the salaries of health workers to them. Because one of the issues now is the concept of no work, no pay. And the lecturers are saying, for us to even go back to work, we need money. So it's neither here nor there. We should look at it holistically. And permit me to bring in the experience we had in the aviation sector. Recently, the key players in the aviation sector were planning to down tools, and the federal government moved in. So how did they resolve that?
But what happens to the students? I mean, what happens to the students? I know ASUU has given their own part. I think government too, just like you rightly said, they find it not met a commensurate measure of what ASUU is demanding for, but at least they've tried to meet up with their demands. What happens to the students if ASUU continues with this strike?
I feel for the students, but I think, personally speaking and globally considering this matter, we should move away from palliative measures. It's just like telling me I'm flying to New York City from Lagos and there is no spare tire in the aircraft, and you are saying because that trip is important, I should go ahead with that trip. No. I mean, let's look at the other side. What is the future of education? Okay, students, they go back to school now. The situation continues. That is the point we are making. So what quality will the lecturers deliver to them? I mean, I'm in the school of thought that you must respect the rule of law, and other has been given comply. But there was a young man at the airport with the mother jumping around enjoying himself, and the mother screamed at him that, sit down there. The boy sat down and looked at the mom and said, Mom, I'm sitting down, but in my heart, I am standing up. And that is the situation we have now. I'm an HR practitioner, I'm a lawyer, and I believe in what we call alternative dispute resolution strategic engagement. And that seems to have failed. I mean, sincerely speaking, I feel for the students, I feel for the government. Recently, a minister of state said the government could not go and borrow, is it 1.3 trillion to pay the lecturers? But are we denying that we are going the lecturers?
We have fast run out of time, and I would crave your indulgence to please let Dr. Lateef, because he's in University of Hull, and you did mention that Nigerians pay a lot to travel out. Please, if you can, in less than a minute, is it time Nigerians start paying for quality education? Because a lot of people will say, you know, this is one of the last things the common man enjoys, and maybe in order to get out of this quagmire, we need to pay a commensurate amount for university education. If you can, in less than a minute, I would appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Let me quickly speak to that. And I want to start by saying, well, I do not have any disagreement whatsoever with my learned brother, Barrister Ologunde, regarding the analysis of the crisis or the issue or challenges. But we can sit here till tomorrow talking about the challenges. So I think the problem here is what you raised at the last point, where you talk about the student. It doesn't seem that the stakeholders, the federal government now, which I think is mostly in a manner of speech, has not been responsible enough. And then the teachers, who I think have not been doing enough to solve the problem. So basically for me, I think the federal government needs to wake up and reimagine or rethink their funding model for tertiary education in Nigeria. We cannot afford to run the universities the way we run it. There is no, you can only see anywhere in the world where university education is entirely free or actually funded by government. So people should start paying. And government should introduce, I would say, scholarship, grant, and all of that to support indigent students. But the truth is, we will continue to have these challenges for as long as government, has failed to demonstrate responsibility. And by responsibility, I mean we need a robust, funding plan.
Definitely, a funding plan indeed. The government still has a lot of work to do, especially when it comes to the education sector in Nigeria. Thank you so much to Dr. Lateef, Barrister Jide Ologun, and Adinola Michael for this wonderful conversation. Thank you.
And this is where we drop the anchor on today's edition of The Conversation. Thank you very much for being a part of the program. I'm Benga Aboroa.
And I'm Rita Omodia.